My wife told me she was pregnant. But I can't be the father because I'm infertile. I'm 38, my wife is 33. We've been married for 2 years and dated for 3 before that. She wanted to get married more than I did, and to make her happy, I agreed. A year ago, we started trying for a baby again, at her insistence. We tried hard, but nothing worked. The situation affected my mental health so badly that I decided to get checked. While we were trying to conceive, my wife became rather cruel. I tried to cope with her behavior, but it became unbearable for me. A few days after my test, the doctors told me I was infertile. Honestly, it broke my heart. Even though the idea of having a baby wasn't mine, I had already begun picturing myself as a father and I genuinely wanted it. Learning that I could never become a dad was the most painful news I'd ever received at that point in my life. But worse was yet to come. I was trying to gather the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we couldn't conceive. But I was scared of how she'd react. She had already been acting pretty harshly toward me, and I couldn't imagine how she'd take it, knowing that what she wanted most might never happen with me. So I waited a few days after receiving my test results before telling her. But in the end, she beat me to it with a surprise. 4 days after I found out I was infertile, she sat me down and said she had really important news. I was terrified. I thought maybe she had somehow found out about my infertility. But no, she wanted to tell me that she was finally pregnant. I was utterly shocked by what she was saying. But thankfully, she didn't know how I really felt and she started celebrating almost immediately. I tried to share in her joy so she wouldn't suspect anything. But the very next day, I went for another fertility test, just to be absolutely sure. And again, the results came back the same. I was stunned because if I wasn't the father, then my wife had definitely cheated on me. The medical procedures necessary for artificial insemination would have been expensive, and since I was the sole breadwinner in our family, she wouldn't have been able to do it without asking me for the money. Which meant only one thing: she had clearly cheated on me. The thought was so strange and horrifying that I did nothing for the next few days while my wife planned a full-on party to announce her pregnancy. She looked truly happy, and I was absolutely crushed. But I couldn't afford to show it, because I needed to get to the bottom of what was going on. I didn't even tell my family what was happening and kept everything to myself. It felt way too personal to share with anyone. I also couldn't talk to my wife about my suspicions, because first of all, too much time had passed already. And second, I wanted to find out who the real father of the baby was. Because if I confronted her too early, she might have just walked away and I'd never know the truth. Thankfully, I figured everything out on the day of the party. There were a lot of people at the celebration: our families, our friends, and a few of my coworkers. She had also invited one of our neighbors, the guy who lives right across the street. He's 27, young, and without a doubt, looks way better than I do. Better than me? He probably looks better than most people. He's a model. Or rather, he's still trying to make a name for himself in the modeling industry. He moved into his aunt's house near the city because his own family lives really far away. My wife had always had a soft spot for this guy. She cooked for him and his aunt when he first moved in. He even came over for dinner a few times, and we'd talk about his career. He's polite, well-read, and just like my wife, specializes in literature. They had a lot in common and immediately clicked when they met for the first time. I never had anything against the guy, because he seemed nice enough, and I trusted my wife. But when he walked into our house on the day of the party, and I saw her eyes light up, I knew something had changed. She went straight to him the moment he walked in, and they hugged for way longer than she hugged anyone else. No one else seemed to notice, but I did. And I knew something was going on between them. I just needed a way to confirm it. So I pretended I was going to the bathroom, but instead went to the bedroom and opened my wife's laptop. A few days after she told me she was pregnant, I had already checked her phone while she was sleeping, but I didn't find anything suspicious. Getting access to her laptop was a bit harder, since whenever I was home, she was always on it, either watching something or typing. Whenever I asked what she was doing, she would turn the screen away from me and say she was working on her novel. This had been going on for months, and I respected her privacy, genuinely believing she was writing something. But now the situation was different, and I was almost certain that the novel was just a cover for whatever she was hiding. Luckily, there was no password on the laptop, so I got in easily. After some digging, I found another email address besides her primary one. I switched over to that inbox and looked through the sent and received messages. They were full of love letters from both my wife and our neighbor. I realized it was him because the guy used his real name. In the more recent emails, she told him she was pregnant. He didn't take it well and was upset, so the messages stopped for a while, presumably because he wanted to end things. But my wife wasn't going to let that happen. Eventually, I found the worst message of all, where she told him she had spoken with a friend who was a lawyer, and the friend would help her file for divorce right after the baby was born. The entire reason she had pushed so hard to have a child with me was so she could secure child support and alimony payments after the divorce. That way, she could run off with our neighbor a few months later and live happily ever after. I was horrified reading that email, and to this day I still feel sick every time I think about it. Still, I pulled myself together quickly and took photos of all the emails with my phone before closing the laptop and putting it back where I found it. Honestly, I was less shocked by the cheating than I was by this disgusting, elaborate plan. Cheating is one thing, but trying to trick me into having a child just so she could use that child to bleed me dry and fund her fantasy life with her loser boyfriend? That was next level insanity. And the cherry on top? She was such a good actress that I never suspected a thing. But I was furious and I decided I would go all the way and get my revenge. I was going to play along and then strike when she least expected it. There was no way I was going to let her walk away from this without feeling the same pain, betrayal, and heartbreak that I had felt when I learned who she truly was. Call me a psycho if you want, but I did what I had to do. So, for the next 9 months, I played the role of the perfect husband and soon-to-be father. It was tough knowing the whole time that she was lying to me non-stop. But the more she lied and pretended to be happy with me, the stronger my resolve became to see it through to the end. I went with her to every doctor's appointment, made sure she took her vitamins on time, and was the dream husband anyone would want. And then, finally, just a few days ago, my wife went into labor. I was insanely nervous because of everything that was going on, but I pushed those feelings aside and drove her to the hospital myself. I had already called her parents, but not mine. I didn't want them there in case things got too dramatic. Her parents had to drive about an hour to reach the hospital, so we had some time alone. That's when I decided to drop the bomb. Once she was safely in the delivery room, I told her I was going to step out and call our neighbor so he could come see her. She looked stunned and started mumbling, saying there was no need, that she didn't want some random person in the room while giving birth. So I just smiled and showed her the results of my fertility test, along with the divorce papers I had filed just a few days before her expected due date. I had brought them with me on purpose. She looked at everything, still clearly confused. So I explained that even if I had wanted to, I physically couldn't have gotten her pregnant, so the baby wasn't mine. Then I told her about the emails I had found in her super secret email account. That's when she finally realized what was happening. Her face was priceless. As I walked out of the room and she struggled to find the words, I honestly thought I might have to check myself into the hospital. My heart was pounding so hard. I called our neighbor to let him know my wife was in labor. I didn't even wait for him to respond. I just hung up the phone as fast as I could. Then I got in my car and waited for her family to arrive. The moment I saw her father's car pull up to the hospital, I drove away as fast as I possibly could. I even turned off my phone for good measure and headed out to a motel in the countryside. I had packed all my stuff weeks ago and hidden it in my trunk, so I had everything I needed and wouldn't be caught off guard. I spent the rest of the day watching TV, drinking beer, and doing everything I could to distract myself from what had just happened. That night, I actually slept pretty peacefully knowing the show was finally over. The next morning, I woke up and turned my phone back on. Naturally, there were hundreds of messages from my wife and our neighbor, none of which I even bothered to open. However, I did scroll through a few texts from my parents and brother. I figured my wife must have contacted them when she couldn't reach me. So, I decided to call my parents and talk. I told them I'd be coming home soon and even asked them to have my brother come over if possible, so I could explain everything. They deserved to know the truth. When I arrived at my parents' house, my brother was already there. They all looked a bit confused and slightly annoyed, which was understandable, since from their point of view, I had just skipped the birth of my own child and made them miss the birth of their grandchild. But I sat them down and told them everything. I explained the reasons behind what I did. By the time I finished the story, they were speechless. I had braced myself for a storm of questions and accusations, but none came. All my father said was that he hoped nothing worse would come out of this. If the others had anything to say, they kept it to themselves. So in that regard, things went pretty smoothly. That was a few days ago. Since then, my family hasn't said much, but my wife has done everything in her power to blame me for ruining her first-time motherhood experience. She's still trying to call me and has been texting non-stop since I left, but I haven't responded. Even our neighbor messaged me a few hours ago, saying my wife was really upset and that we needed to put our differences aside for her sake and at least try to make peace. I can't believe the audacity of these people still trying to talk to me like this is just a minor misunderstanding. He also mentioned a couple of other things in his message, like how my wife had started falling in love with me again during her pregnancy, and that it had shocked both of them. So I should at least consider giving our marriage another chance. Yeah, total nonsense. Because if she really had started to fall in love with me again, why was he still in her life? I don't understand why they think I'm that naive. My wife is upset, but there's nothing I can do about that. What really pisses her off is that I knew everything from the beginning but stayed with her anyway, playing along the whole time. She accuses me of lying to her, says I was wrong to stay with her during the pregnancy and let her believe everything was fine, even though I knew the child wasn't mine and that she had cheated on me with our neighbor. Update 1. It's been about a week since the baby was born, and I'm still living in a hotel room. I haven't visited my wife once and I don't plan to. She keeps texting and calling, but I don't see the point. I made it very clear that I don't want to speak with her or hear anything she has to say. I haven't blocked her yet, but the neighbor is already on the block list since he had the nerve to text me and remind me that my wife still has hope and wants me back. I'm 100% sure the only reason he's still with her and trying to convince me to forgive her is because he's hoping she can still get something out of me, some kind of child support or financial benefit from the upcoming legal process. They're both basically unemployed. My wife was a housewife, something I appreciated and respected. But she wasn't just taking care of the house, she was also cheating behind my back. And that's unforgivable. And before anyone tries to attack me for it, no, I wasn't the one who asked her to quit working after we got married. When we were still dating, I supported her professional ambitions, and she had a job. But then she said she wanted to quit and focus on our home. I didn't object, it was her decision. And I make enough money to support us. I'm pretty confident that my lawyer will be able to get me out of paying child support once we prove she cheated. And hopefully, it won't be hard to do. As for the neighbor, he's still struggling to find a decent paying job in the modeling industry. So taking care of himself, let alone my wife and the baby, will be almost impossible for them, even if they pool their resources. So yeah, good luck to them. I'm just grateful I got out of this mess. I won't have to fork over any money or waste my time dragging this out in court. Hopefully, she won't try to fight the divorce. But given her complete lack of common sense, it's entirely possible that she will. I'm ready for that. The photos of the emails she sent from her secret account are still safely stored on my phone and backed up on my laptop. So I'm not too worried. Even if she deletes her account, she can't erase the evidence I have. And I know I'll be protected no matter what. Worst case, I'm willing to pay her something, but at least I won't be with her. She should consider herself lucky that I'm giving her time to leave the house voluntarily instead of evicting her. The house is legally in my name. Right now, I'm just hoping things calm down soon and maybe this will all be over for good. Update 2. Turns out I was right, my wife's an idiot. She decided to negotiate because she wasn't satisfied with the settlement I offered, which basically only covered the money she had spent during our marriage. Even that felt generous to me. I honestly don't know what miracle she was expecting. Well, good luck to her. Yesterday, she texted me saying she had moved out of the house. I was thrilled to go back home, thinking she had probably moved in with her parents or something. But I was disappointed to find out that she had moved in with the neighbor, the very guy across the street. Now I have to see her and her boyfriend every single day. I even considered moving back into a hotel, but I didn't do it. This is my house, and I have every right to live where I want. I wasn't going to pack my things and run just because they want to make my life miserable. I wondered why she hadn't moved in with her parents. Living with the neighbor could hurt her case in the divorce, it just makes things worse for her. But I didn't have to think too hard about it. While going through all the unread messages I'd received over the last few days, I noticed one from her father. I hadn't replied to most people who had messaged me lately, and his message had gotten buried with the rest. It was a long message where he expressed regret over what his daughter had done and said that their family strongly disapproved of her actions. His words meant a lot to me. They confirmed that my feelings were valid. I even felt tears coming to my eyes, but I held them back. He apologized for her behavior and said they would no longer support her in any way, especially after she said she wanted to contest the divorce. Up to this point, nothing my wife had done made any sense to me. Everything she tried would only backfire on her. Even someone like her should have realized that. Either she's completely stupid or she still has some twisted, disgusting plan left to play out. I hope it's the first one. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's the second. She really is the worst kind of person. Living across the street from them is definitely going to cause problems. I'm sure they'll try to make my life harder or do something to provoke me. But I'm determined not to let them get under my skin because they would absolutely use it against me. At least I'm saving a ton of money now that I don't have to live in a hotel. Update 3. It's been a month since divorce negotiations began, and things aren't going well for my wife. I managed to prove that she cheated, and she made it easier for me by moving in with the guy the first accused her of having an affair with. So there's no doubt left about the truth of my claims. She tried to make a false accusation, claiming that I was an alcoholic, which caused my infertility, and that's why she cheated. She said that when we were trying to conceive, I became cruel and angry toward her. But that was extremely easy to disprove. Everyone knew I had quit drinking last year when we decided to try for a baby, and I haven't touched alcohol since. I keep wondering why she thought that lie would work. It was incredibly stupid on her part. I think she was just desperate, trying to grab onto anything she could, since her original plan completely fell apart. And now she's too busy with motherhood to plot some new grand scheme. She's overwhelmed, and the baby's father is too dumb to be of any real help. So that's how they're living now. At this point, it's clear to both of us that the chances of her getting any child support from me are basically non-existent. I think she told the boyfriend that, because a few days ago she and the baby were kicked out of his house quite rudely, in fact. Yes, it's true. I heard yelling and fighting coming from their place, and a few minutes later, I saw him pushing my wife out the door with the baby in her arms, screaming and cursing at her. I watched it all unfold from my living room window. And when I saw him push her while she was holding the baby, I ran outside to help. Our personal war didn't matter in that moment. I couldn't let an innocent baby suffer because of something that wasn't his fault. By the time I got to the doorstep, the door had already been slammed shut. My wife was standing there crying, clutching our son. I took the baby in my arms, grabbed her by the hand, and led them both back to my house across the street. Then I called her father and asked him to come pick them up. He arrived about an hour later and took them away, thanking me again for everything I'd done. During that hour, my wife cried like a child. So I ended up having to comfort both the baby and her. I wanted to call the police, but she somehow convinced me not to. She didn't want any more trouble. She kept apologizing over and over again for everything that had happened. She said she had been so blindly in love that she lost all her dignity and moral compass. She said she genuinely regretted everything. She told me she'd accept whatever came next and wouldn't fight over anything anymore. She just wanted the divorce finalized as soon as possible. I guess, in that moment, I got at least one good thing out of this disaster. Hopefully, she actually presses charges against that bastard and gets the help she needs. But at the very least, I did what I could and I acted like a decent human being. I have no regrets. So, tell me in the comments, what do you think about this whole story? Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. Check out our previous videos right here. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and good luck.